Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my first YouTube video. I'm excited this evening that I'm having the opportunity to talk to you about the 4 characteristics that allow an airplane to fly. And please be gracious in forgiving me for not being as articulate or profound as some of my other classmates I'm sure will be. So for this evening's lesson, we are going to talk about, again, those 4 characteristics that allow an airplane to fly. Those characteristics include basically thrust, lift, weight is a factor, and drag are also factors. And what's so remarkable about aviation is that it's an issue that has to deal with balancing another issue. For instance, if you're going to have ultimately unavoidable drag, you have to have thrust to overcome the drag that an airplane is going to undoubtedly produce by just being present in air. And so the wonderful thing again is if you're going to have resistance by drag, you have to overcome that resistance by thrust. In addition, if you're going to have weight, and I don't know about you, but I have some weight attached to me, as we all do. And to overcome the weight that an aircraft has, and our bodies being inside of an aircraft that also produces weight, we have to have lift. And lift will offset the weight as thrust offsets drag. And what's so fascinating for me is that the aviation industry has spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to offset these dilemmas. How can we offset drag? Well, airplanes have become much more aerodynamic. The makers of the aircraft have learned how to put an aircraft together where they have been able to minimize the amount of a drag on an airplane. You're inevitably going to have parasitic drag because you're going to have friction from rivets that may be on the skin of the aircraft. You're going to have situations where just the fuselage itself is going to be a hindrance to aerodynamics. In addition, you're going to have situations where the junctions where the parts come together are going to at times create drag, and that's why we have thrust to overcome these things so that an airplane can fly. And then also we have to have proper aerodynamics so that the aircraft will have the ability to produce lift. We need wings. We need air to flow across those wings, in addition with the thrust to produce lift. And so it was quite evident that engineers had to get together and figure out a way to overcome the hindrances of aviation. And we know hindrances are always going to be drag and lift. And so companies like Cessna and Boeing and Airbus and all these other aircraft manufacturers, McDonnell Douglas, have had to sit down and put their aircraft in air chambers to ensure that they can overcome these forces that are antithetical for flight. And so today's lesson was pretty simple. I hope I didn't bore you too much, but today we talked about thrust, the ability to move forward. We talked about lift, the ability to rise, and we talked about the offsetting forces of weight that try to stop lift and drag that try to offset thrust. And thank goodness that we have had the wherewithal to overcome those things. And I've always said, man discovers because God reveals, and God reveals, and therefore man shall discover. So I hope I didn't bore you tonight, and I hope I did myself well with my first YouTube video, and now I have to figure out how to upload it. God bless you, grace and peace, and thank you so much for listening to my presentation.